Hello, this is the second session of the first week of our St. James United Church exploration of spirituality. In the first session, we discussed the stance that the United Church takes on questions like, why should I believe in God, or why should anyone believe in God? And I encourage the listeners to engage in some personal reflection and look closely at themselves and their own questions. I have also opened up a private discussion page on Facebook so that we can type in our ideas in a more confidential way. Remember that as we grow and change, our theology will grow and change. Nothing stays exactly the same. Changing one's mind on issues is not only acceptable, but it's often desirable. Before we finish off this video on the topic of the week, the topic is, we are not alone, we live in God's world. I want to acknowledge the stress that I am feeling and that likely many people are feeling at this moment. When violence happens in this province, no matter where it happens, it feels like it's right next door, and it affects us. The people of James Smith Reserve are sheltered in place to keep themselves safe until the situation is resolved, and they cannot even engage in proper mourning for their community's loss and pain. I said yesterday that the world is a messed up place sometimes, and we can't always make sense of things. And this senseless violence is a mess that just does not make sense. We need each other, and we need God as a support to get us through this period of crisis. And at the same time, as we have this chaos to deal with, we have also received news that a friend and colleague, Bernice Soto, has passed away. This end of her life has been expected, and she had specific instructions for her palliative care, and her passing was in the logical order of God's world. It hurts, but then death will always hurt. So we have these two unreconcilable situations to deal with: terrible chaos and violence on one hand, and the structure and order of the end of life on the other. Both exist in the same breath. On my wall in front of me, in front of my writing desk, is a homemade poster that reminds me, remember to ask the question, where is God in this situation? This question leads us to 3 words about the great isness of the universe, 3 words that have meaning and importance, but they are also problematic words. These are omni words. Omni is a Latin term that means all. The first statement is, God is omnipresent. That means God is present all the time, 24/7, no rest. The second is, God is omniscient. That is, God understands and comprehends everything. And the third word is omnipotent. God is omnipotent. God is able to bring about any possibility. So these three words describe God: omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent. God is everywhere, knows everything, and is all-powerful. So I asked, anybody was going to ask the question, why doesn't God just snap God's fingers and take away the violence and the chaos that's happened in the past few days in this province? If God knows everything, why didn't God prevent this from happening in the first place? These are very human questions, particularly in time of great turmoil and violence. We want God to solve all these problems and prevent other problems from occurring. But I'm going to answer these questions with another question. What does God want us to do? And that's the crux, isn't it? We are in relationship with each other as human beings, and we are in a relationship with God. Part of being in a relationship is figuring out what our responsibility is. That's the hard part of being a United Church kind of Christian, deciding what I or we are going to do to make God's world a better place. As disciples of Jesus, we try to copy Jesus' way of knowing God's design and doing our part. All that the word disciple means is learner. We are learning to be all we can be. This is a journey. It's a quest to discover our relationship with God. We as individuals and we as a community of faith have this task before us. Now, we do have some help in discerning our relationship with each other and with God. We have a whole bunch of stories recorded by our spiritual ancestors over 10,000 years. People who lived and died trying to figure out these relationships with each other and with God. And the stories have clues in them, things that our spiritual ancestors lived through and learned and told and retold around campfires for centuries and finally wrote down. Sometimes the conclusions of one story conflict with the conclusions of another. Sometimes they conflict with what we know today. But even with all those contradictions and conflicts, the Bible is a pretty good place to start gathering information about what worked and what didn't work in other times and places. In the discussion notes that I will add into the private chat later, I will add more things for you to think about. Until we get together in the chat, and until we get together at the end of this week for a discussion, until we get together next week for another of these meditations, God be with us all. Amen.